All right. So moving on to our next story, which comes from Bleeping Computer, and the title here is Treasury Hackers Also Breached U.S. Foreign Investments Review Office. I don't
which
think.
was
Oh, go ahead. Go ahead,
interesting.
sir.
It's
Yeah,
interesting because we were told early on like they never went beyond Treasury. So
correct, correct. Well,
yeah.
but again, we were. This, by the way, is the same threat actor that had hacked allegedly the U.S. telecom companies
Hmm.
to spy on people through the warrantless surveillance facilities that telcos use. Which by the way, is a reminder, prompted the U.S. government to encourage people to use encrypted methods of communications, which is really, really bizarre. So the threat actor here is, I think it's called Silky Spittoon or something like that. It's allegedly a Chinese state-backed
For the record,
threat.
it's Silk Typhoon, but I agree with
Oh,
you. It
oh,
shouldn't be such a cool name. As I go back to our previous show, I think we need to call these people like Weeping Corpuscle Cyst Creator.
Silky Spittoon was the best I could come up with on the spot. So, um,
Mother-in-law's meatloaf surprise threat actor.
that might not translate well into all cultures. I'm thinking that some may say, "Well, that's a
That's
good
fair.
thing." So,
Yeah.
um, I don't know that we've had a show talking about what happened with the Department of Treasury, but there was a fairly high profile breach announced in the Department of Treasury, specifically in the Office of Foreign Assets Control, which is where, for those of you who don't know, that's where a lot of the restrictions on, uh, you know, who U.S. entities are allowed to do business with outside of the U.S. So things like enforcing um, embargoes and um, denied parties. So people that you're not, specific entities and people that you're not allowed to do business with. And this, by the way, if you've ever heard about ransomware actors, you're not allowed to pay ransomware actors because they're viewed as supporting this terrorism and whatnot. It is OFAC that is the vehicle by which those are individuals and entities are identified, but also enforced. And so uh, the story at the time was that this threat actor had breached the Department of Treasury's OFAC department through a Beyond Trust remote access support application using a stolen API key. There's really no indication of how they got the API key, but at the time, the story was that they got in and they had breached some number of workstations at the Department of Treasury. But as you just said, at the time, the story is, well, that was it. They got in and that's that. But now the story has expanded out to include what's called CFIUS, because every government agency has to have an acronym. This is the Committee on Foreign Investments in the United States. So they're the ones who decide whether or not a foreign entity can invest in or buy a U.S. company, usually for national security or economic purposes. So there's no indication exactly how they got in. It's unclear if they used the same vulnerability, but it's concerning to me that this particular threat actor just seems to be walking around somewhat unchallenged. Previously, all up in like 8 or 9 different major US telcos networks. And now they're continuing to find more and more parts of the Department of Treasury that they've impacted.
Yeah, it seems if the theory is they're using this beyond trust remote access tool, perhaps go change all those keys if you use that. Just a
Yes.
crazy idea.
Cra-
I know.
crazy idea. So there's, by the way, there's no indication that Beyond Trust's software has any kind of a vulnerability. The allegation is that they're using some sort of stolen API key. Again, unclear how they got the API key. Maybe as a result of a vulnerability, maybe as a result of somebody posting some crap to GitHub. Who knows? I'm sure, because this is affecting a government agency, I'm going to guess that we will at some point have a readout on what happened, but we don't know at this point. And so my recommendation certainly is, if you use this software, and by the way, like we've seen this sort of thing happen before. Like this has echoes of solar winds
Yeah.
from years ago. Like we need to be really careful when we're picking and deploying the tools that we use to manage our infrastructure.
Well, to be fair, though, Beyond Trust had a good reputation, and we don't know that this is something like a SolarWinds situation yet. I don't want to throw Beyond Trust under the
No.
bus
I
too
didn't
soon.
mean. Yeah, I didn't mean to imply that. More so that the tools that we use to manage our environments can be abused, and that abuse can come as a result of vulnerabilities in the products or through perhaps our own negligence in how we set it up or how we do or don't secure the authentication to it. But it's worth thinking through, like, do you have the right levels of protection uh, around the thing that you're deploying like this, and
Yeah,
how are you
or
monitoring for it?
have you threat modeled if a bad actor were to get access to this SaaS tool? How would I react? What could
Yeah,
I
how
do?
would I detect it? How would I know?
Right, right, and then what? How do I investigate and evict them and then repair? There's this is something sort of we've danced around this before. It's kind of like certain vulnerability management tools or other security tools that have very broad access to the environment to do their job could be a very interesting avenue for attack. And this we don't know. And because it's government, we'll find out in about 2029 by then. But nonetheless, this is an external access point that you're granting to a third party to do remote administration work, is my understanding of the tool being used here, or at least implied or understood or thought to be involved. That's great. That facilitates a lot of useful work, but also has risk that comes with it. And how do you mitigate that risk?
Right. And I've said for a long time, one of the big fears I have is the weaponization of the centralized IT tools that we use. And again, certainly vulnerability scanners and management tools are examples of that. We've been beleaguered by Active Directory issues for forever and a day. There are many others. So we had, again, SolarWinds, and I'm not, again, there's no indication or assertion that there's anything wrong with Beyond Trust. I think my point is that I think this is one of the next horizons of attack targets. And we're also seeing it in firewalls. Like that people or actors are having a lot of success in attacking firewalls. And so they are
Mm-hmm.
going to continue. We're going to see more and more and more because it works. And so I think we're going to start seeing more attacks on these infrastructure management tools. Sometimes it'll be the result of a vulnerability. Sometimes it'll be the result of the supply chain for that tooling got hacked and taken over, kind of like we saw with SolarWinds. And sometimes it's going to be like the case with lots of tools like Jenkins and others. People are just deploying them in insecure ways,
Yeah.
combined with the periodic vulnerability.
So you mentioned this is one of your big fears. How does that rank against like clowns?
Clowns are pretty scary. I I don't know. I think clowns might still be more concerning.
Okay. Just wanted to be sure. We'll check in periodically on how this ranks
Yeah.
against your clown fear.
Yeah. Well, I mean, look, I'm unemployed, and so I don't have to worry too much about central management servers, but I mean, there could be a clown in any storm drain at any time.
It could be one in your closet right now.
It's true. It's a good thing I don't have any closets in here. So,
Well, keep an eye out.
right. But we'll certainly learn more about what happened in the coming months and years. But know, again, one of the concerns I've got is this is very likely a nation state actor, right? We're the allegation is it's somebody associated with the Chinese government. We're going to pick apart the tactics that the adversary used here. And those tactics are going to be recycled by commodity or commercial threat actors who are doing less interesting stuff like installing ransomware or trying to steal information out of your S3 buckets or what have you. So just because this is a, super sophisticated actor and none of us are running IT for the Department of Treasury, we don't have to worry about this salty spittoon. I think we have to pay attention and make sure that we're understanding what happened. And if it informs us in our security programs, we need to be making changes because I think we're going to see these sorts of tactics show up at our front door someday.
Sure. I
So
agree.